A factory worker gives birth to a baby boy with an unusual physical characteristic, and she struggles with the choice of raising him on her own or handing him over to opportunistic specialists. In an office, Katie speaks to a social worker regarding her inability to contact the father of her baby. She says it's been a week since she last spoke to the man, her coworker at the factory, and she believes he might have returned to his hometown in Spain. The worker points out that she's 3 months back on rent and suggests contacting the authorities and filing a marital abandonment case against the father. Desperate, Katie asks if it's possible to place the baby in foster care for the time being. However, the worker says applying for foster care is an arduous process, encouraging the woman to take some time before making a decision. Several months earlier, the woman's daughter, Lisa, enters her room to open the curtains to wake her up. When the child tells her to get up so they won't be late, Katie groggily says she doesn't want to go to work. Later, the girl prepares her breakfast by heating milk on the stove. At the dining table, Lisa asks her mother why she said she didn't want to go to work today, so Katie explains that some days are like that. Minutes later, they head to school on the woman's scooter, and after dropping the daughter off, she says she'll pick her up at 5 p.m. At the factory, Katie screws caps on the plastic containers at her station. Suddenly, she sees new employees on a tour of the facility, and she shyly averts her gaze when one of the men intently stares at her. During lunch, her friend Odile turns to look at the man, Paco, and remarks that he isn't that attractive. Outside, while the woman sits on a bench for her smoke break, the new employee introduces himself. Later, they make love in a bathroom stall, leaving separately after the deed so as not to arouse suspicion. When she returns to the station, the boss reprimands Katie for her lateness, so she lies and says she was an alley B, but the anxiety and the fumes cause the woman to faint. That evening, Lisa waits outside the school, and when the mother finally arrives, she apologizes profusely for being late. After Katie tucks her in bed, the daughter asks her to keep the hall light on because she's scared. The woman obliges, then assures she has nothing to be afraid of because she's there with her. In the living room, the mother converts the couch into a bed and smiles as she remembers the intimate moment she and Paco shared earlier that day. The next day, the man waits for Katie after work, and she explains that what happened between them yesterday was an accident because she never sleeps with men she's just met. To her relief, he says he isn't normally like that either. That evening, the woman tells her daughter that she needs to go to bed because she is going out to dinner with a friend. Annoyed, Lisa returns to her room and angrily throws her doll to the floor. Later during the date with Paco, Katie shares that she no longer speaks to her daughter's father because he didn't want to have her in the first place. Then she learns that the man was married once when he still lived in Spain, but that it didn't work out. After the date, the woman takes him back to her place and they make love. While she caresses his chest, he asks if she doesn't like all the hair, and she says that she does. The next day, Lisa sees her mother with the unfamiliar man in the kitchen, and instead of introducing herself, runs back to her room. Katie follows the child and calmly explains that Paco might live with them from now on and that they'll be a new family. The girl boards the bus to school and sees the couple about to ride past on the scooter. However, when she taps on the glass to grab their attention, they don't see her. Months later, the boss informs Paco that their neighbor called and said Katie's on her way to the hospital to give birth. In the waiting area, Lisa tells the man that she'd like to name her baby brother Ricky. When the mother finally wakes up, she lovingly looks over at her newborn, Ricky. Days later, Paco surprises his girlfriend with the changes he made to Lisa's room so the children can share it eventually. While eating dinner, the baby cries, so the mother attends to him. Paco says they can feed the infant after the meal, but Katie wants to do so immediately, and she orders the daughter to join her father at the table. Annoyed, the child says the man isn't her father, but she obediently eats her chicken anyway. The next day, Lisa sees Paco talking to a woman outside the apartment. So as not to be seen, she quickly runs inside the building. In the apartment, the mother asks her daughter to get her purse so she can check their lottery ticket. Seconds later, the man arrives, and Katie asks him where he's been. He immediately complains about the baby's crying, prompting his girlfriend to remind him that he promised to help out with the childcare. Paco counters that he's already agreed to work nights so that there's always one parent home with Ricky. While the couple argues, Lisa cradles her brother in her arms and feeds him. Later that night, the man apologizes for earlier, and the woman asks if he changed because of the baby. He jokes that it's her who's changed because the infant gets all the attention now. So Katie says her maternity leave ends tomorrow and things will go back to the way they were before. Then the pair share a kiss. The next day, Paco hears Ricky crying, so he prepares milk in the kitchen. Later, he changes the baby's diaper and lays him down in the crib for a nap. That afternoon, the mother and daughter return and find the man sleeping on the couch with the infant in his arms. As Katie prepares Ricky for his bath, she calls Paco into the room and points out the bruise on his shoulder. She says it wasn't there that morning and asks if the man dropped him. Confused, he swears he didn't, but reasons that he could have accidentally knocked the baby's back against his crib. Later, while Paco's working the night shift, Lisa worriedly asks her mother if Ricky's going to die, so Katie discourages her from thinking such silly thoughts and tells her to go to bed. Then when the baby starts crying, the woman checks his back, and to her surprise, notices that the first bruise turned into a lump, while another bruise appeared on the opposite shoulder blade. The next day, Katie confronts the man because she believes he lied about hurting their son. Offended by her accusation, Paco tosses the apartment keys on the floor, puts on his jacket, and leaves without telling her where he's going and for how long. Seconds later, Lisa asks her mother if the man left, and after she affirms, hugs her. One day, the child hears her brother crying from the living room. Then, she pretends she is treating injuries on the baby's body by acting them out on her doll. When Katie returns from work, she asks the girl to fetch Ricky from his crib so they can feed him. However, Lisa exclaims that the infant's nowhere to be found. The woman goes to check the crib, but all she finds are bloody prints on the mattress. The daughter swears she never opened the window and that no one came while the mother was out. Suddenly, they hear cooing and finally spot Ricky atop the tall cabinet. The mother asks her daughter how he got there, but she doesn't know. Katie tries to reach the infant so she can bring him back down safely. However, the fussy baby wriggles from her grasp and falls to the floor. To their surprise, they see two featherless bird-like wings flapping on Ricky's back. Later, they wash off the blood from the appendages, and the woman hopefully remarks that they'll fall off soon. After the bath, they make sure the baby won't fly out by fastening a blanket over the crib with clothespins. The daughter points out how much it resembles a cage, so the mother explains it's so he doesn't hurt himself. Then, Lisa asks if they'll take her brother to the doctor, but Katie thinks it's best if no one else knows. During dinner, the woman reminds the girl to not tell anyone at school about Ricky. Before going to bed, Katie thinks of calling Paco but ultimately decides against it. 1 week later, the mother measures the baby's wings and notes that they've grown 3 more inches in length. Then, she and Lisa try taping the appendages down, but it doesn't work. So the woman decides to cut holes in the infant's shirt so the wings can poke through, making him more comfortable. In the living room, they allow Ricky to fly a few feet above the couch and clap in delight. Over the next few weeks, the baby's wings grow even more and sprout brown feathers. One day, Paco waits for Lisa outside school to ask how his son's doing. Remembering her mother's advice, the girl says her brother's okay, but she keeps mum about the wings. Meanwhile, Katie goes to the library to ask for a book about bird wings. Later, she heads to the market to measure a chicken wing so she can approximate how big the infant's appendages might become. When she returns to the apartment, she enlists Lisa's help to tape cushions on sharp edges around the living room and place pillows on the floor. Then, they secure knee pads on the baby's legs, wrap foam around his torso, and put a lightweight helmet on his head. Eventually, they allow the infant to fly, and when he gets too close to the light, Katie tells Lisa to turn it off. Suddenly, Ricky slams into the glass window and falls to the floor. Thankfully, he fell on pillows, but the girl spots a wound on one of the wings. Minutes later, while the woman treats the injury, the daughter mentions Paco. However, Katie says she doesn't think about him anymore, especially now that her son has wings. That evening, the mother realizes she got 5 numbers in the latest lotto drawing. The next day, they collect their €2,000 winnings, and the woman kisses the baby for bringing them good luck. At the supermarket, the mother and daughter step away for a few moments, and when they return to the cart, find that Ricky removed his jacket and is now flying all over the store. Panicked, they chase the infant through the aisles, and the other bewildered shoppers stare in amazement or take out their phones to record. Later, the police empty the establishment and bring ladders in to catch Ricky. After Katie suggests turning the lights off, the infant hovers by the refrigerated goods section since it's the only area that remains lit. Finally, one officer grabs the baby, and before other people crowd over him, Katie quickly retrieves her child. At the hospital, the mother says she doesn't know if she'll be able to recover from losing Ricky after already losing Paco. So Lisa sits next to the woman and assures her that she'll always be by her side. Eventually, the doctor explains that he spoke to his colleagues and veterinarians, and they agree that they're dealing with an unusual case. Katie fears they might treat her son like a lab rat, so the physician emphasizes they won't do anything without her consent. When the man asks if the infant's father has any notable characteristics, the woman mentions that he's quite hairy, but the doctor says that isn't a factor. The physician learns that they keep Ricky in his crib, prompting him to ask if she thinks their home is a space where the child can thrive. However, despite his reasons as to why he thinks the baby needs to be hospitalized for his own good, Katie insists that she wants to take him home. Because of the gaggle of reporters by the main entrance, the doctor takes the family to the parking garage so they can hail a taxi without being harassed. Outside the apartment building, nosy neighbors and journalists chase after the family, so they run up the stairs as fast as they can. During dinner, they watch a news report about Ricky, with neighbors and coworkers airing out their personal information. Because the only footage of the baby the station retrieved were cell phone videos, some people think it might be a hoax. Suddenly, they hear the infant crying, but when Lisa stands to check on her brother, Katie tells her to leave him alone because everything that's happened is his fault. The next day, the baby's cries wake his sister, who then removes the blanket over his crib so he can fly to the mattress on top of the cabinet. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, and the child lets Paco in the apartment. After the initial surprise, Katie tells her daughter to go to her room so she can speak to the man. He says she saw them on TV and asks why she never told him about their son. The woman apologizes for accusing him of hurting Ricky. Then they share a kiss and make love. After the deed, she asks where he was the whole time they were broken up. He says he went to Paris to work at a restaurant washing dishes and doing plumbing work. She wonders if he was with other women, so he assures her that it wasn't anything serious. He adds that he returned because he missed her and the kids. When the father sees his son flying all over the room, he claps in amazement. Suddenly, the agitated infant loses control and injures his wing. Concerned, Paco thinks the child needs professional help because he isn't safe in the current living conditions. However, Katie reminds him that he's her son, and whatever she decides goes. Later, the doctor treats Ricky's wing in the living room and says that although this was a minor injury, the next one could be much worse. He points out that the baby is growing up in a hostile environment, confirming Paco's concerns. Then, the physician shows them an x-ray and explains that the infant's wings are growing from his shoulder blades. He says they can perform surgery to remove them, but that it'll be quite painful. The father asks what'll happen if they choose to keep the appendages, and the older man worriedly says he might wither away without proper professional care. That night, the curious sister tries to clip Ricky's wings with a pair of scissors. Suddenly, she hears Paco about to enter the room, so she runs to her bed and pretends to sleep. Then, she watches the man lovingly caress the baby's wings through the bars. Later, Paco suggests letting a trusted journalist film their son in exchange for money to fund his care, especially since the woman seems adamant about refusing the doctor's help. Katie scoffs and asks if the only reason he returned was to make some cash off their child. So he reminds her that he left because she accused him of hurting their son, and he expects that she trusts him enough to know that he only wants what's best for their family. The next day, they stand in front of the apartment building to introduce Ricky to the journalists and photographers. To make sure the baby doesn't fly away, Paco ties one end of a long piece of string on his foot. When Katie lets Ricky use his wings, the crowd erupts in excited cheers. Entranced by her son's unbridled happiness at finally flying at a great height, she unconsciously lets go of the string. Everyone chases after the infant, and the mother thinks he's attracted to the reflection in the lake water. After swooping close to the surface, the baby flies into the thick patch of trees on the other side of the lake, and they lose sight of Ricky. The parents call out his name, but he doesn't return, causing the woman to break down in tears. That evening, Paco tells the doctor that it's all his fault, and he fears Katie might blame him forever. The next day, Lisa and the man hand out missing flyers in the busy market. Days later, the hopeful mother hears flapping wings by the window, but to her disappointment, realizes they're just seagulls. After several months, Katie asks Paco if he thinks their son is dead, so he admits that it's unlikely he survived on his own after all this time, and adds that she'll have to accept that their baby is gone. Later, the woman goes for a walk to the lake, where she slowly wades into the water. As she's about to submerge herself, she hears Ricky hovering above. She quickly crawls back to the lake's edge and joyfully points out how much the baby's wings have grown and that he's learned to walk. Then, Katie apologizes for letting go of the string and explains that she was mesmerized by how beautiful it was to watch him fly. As she watches Ricky fly away, she realizes that freedom has allowed her child to thrive, and she smiles. Eventually, the woman returns to the apartment, gives Paco and Lisa a hug, and tells them she loves them. Months later, the man and takes the girl to school on the scooter. Meanwhile, Katie watches them from the apartment window. Then she lays down on the couch, revealing her pregnant belly.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.